Mum found out my grandmother, which was Dad's mum, was also taking an antipsychotic drug, but she never actually spoke about it. And back in 92, after a pretty traumatic event that my mother was involved with, he had a couple of pretty major psychotic episodes. It was pretty traumatic for all of us.
So Jenny, thank you for joining me today on the Lived Experience podcast. And you reached out to me, saying you wanted to share your story, which is fantastic. And I really appreciate that. I wish more people would do that. So maybe you want to talk about first your story and your background and your lived experience with mental health and mental illness.
I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety many years ago. I think I was lucky because I was under a good GP who knew the family story and knew me quite well. So I was put onto medication, and the first medication she put me on worked for me. So yeah, but I've had a lot of things that have happened in my life that probably contributed to having mental illness, and there's also been a genetic side to that as well.
Yeah, so maybe you want to talk a bit more about then maybe some contributing factors or about what's happened.
Basically, years ago, I was bullied quite a lot at school. I had quite a bad experience at university. I guess I put a lot of pressure onto myself and pretty much just got burnt out. From that, I went through unemployment and worked for the dole and a few things like that. And also with all that happening, I was trying to cope with my father having a mental illness and my sister going through similar experiences. So it was probably one thing led to another, and yeah.
Yeah, I read your story online a bit where you do talk about your father. Now, I had a mother with a mental illness. That's why I do this sort of podcast and share about that. So maybe you want to talk about your father and his challenges and obviously how it affected you.
My dad was diagnosed with schizophrenia back in 1992. Before that, we didn't know anything about mental illness because it was pretty much not talked about at the time. In 1982, when his mother passed away, he started displaying different behaviours that my mum noticed, but she thought it was probably part of grieving and not mental illness because no one talked about it back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, it was like talking about say no to drugs. We had the AIDS, HIV epidemic and things like that. But Mum found out my grandmother, which was Dad's mum, was also taking an antipsychotic drug, but she never actually spoke about it. So it obviously goes right back to her end of the family. And back in 92, after a pretty traumatic event that my mother was involved with, he had a couple of pretty major psychotic episodes in that, and that was pretty traumatic for all of us. After one of those episodes, he actually went to a nearby medical centre, saw one of the doctors that sent him to a local psychiatric hospital. He stayed overnight and discharged himself the next morning without undergoing any proper assessments. So he was back home and we didn't know what to do or anything, but the hospital obviously got in contact with the crisis team and they came out and spoke to us and encouraged him to go back to the hospital. But Dad being Dad wouldn't, he was stubborn. But he did go and speak to our family GP at the time, and he was referred to a psychiatrist that started him on medication, but he didn't take it all the time, which made it quite hard to deal with too, because we weren't sure what type of mood he'd be like, whether he'd be in good mood or a not so good mood and things like that. But when my grandmother died a few years later, because I was about 12 in 1985, I started noticing just slight behaviour changes. I thought something's not right because he was talking to himself, he was smoking a lot more, he was walking up and down the hallway a lot, and things that weren't quite normal. But being a 12-year-old, I couldn't sort of really know what was happening.
And with your mother at the time, did she know much about it, or was it just something they just always knew? Or
Mum didn't know anything about mental illness at the time. She actually had to go to the library and get some books out because back then no one spoke about it. There was no internet. So it was really hard to find information.
Yeah, it's a good point, because when you say early 90s, it sounds like it's not too long ago, but it is in regards to this. So just want to make it clear for people that back then, obviously, mental illness, from your perspective, as you said, your mum had to go to the library to get books to learn about the condition. Like, it was something that was not even spoken about as a possibility. And if it was sort of really hush-hush, or a very big stigma.
No one talked about it.
So how do you think about now then? How do you think the changes come along, Jenny, in regards to how we talk about it a bit more now? Do you think it's still a long way to come, or have you seen the progress?
I think there's still a way to go, but we are talking about it more, and people know about it, that it's out there, and people do have depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, or whatever, but there still is stigma around. But yeah, things are getting better each day.
And where do you see the stigma still? Where do you still think there needs to be progression?
There's probably still a lot of stigma where doctors are concerned and things like that. It depends. Some cultures talk about mental illness freely, while other cultures don't. A lot of the Asian cultures don't talk about it as we do. And
Absolutely. Now, when you were growing up with your father with this, did anyone know about your father to help you out, or did your schools help you out, or was there any assistance that was provided to you, or what do you remember the support like back then?
We didn't have any support virtually at school. There was a special education teacher when I went to high school, but that was about it. We had nothing. And
did anyone take an interest in it, or?
No.
Now, regards to, you said, unfortunately, I heard the word bullying. I talk a bit about bullying as well. I was bullied a little bit at school myself. So, you've got this thing going on at home, then you've got to go to school, and you've got bullying as well. How did you manage to deal with all that stress?
I tried to block out what was happening at home and concentrate on my school work at school. And that most of the kids were all right, but there were a few that bullied me quite harshly, to the point where the police was nearly called in at one stage, because I'd been bullied by a girl. She was a year ahead of me, and she bullied me in the school grounds a few times, and I just chose to ignore it. But then I was at a local shopping centre on the Saturday. I was just minding my own business, having an ice cream before I came home, and she came up to me and pretty much pushed the ice cream into my face. And when the school found out about that, the police were nearly called in, because it was obviously assault.
Sorry to hear that.
But I guess my parents, obviously I spoke to my parents about it after it happened as well, but they wanted to leave it go at this stage because they didn't want me making statements or going through the court system and things like that. But I was told by the deputy principal, if it happened again, the police would be called in and things would be escalated.
No, sorry to hear that. From your perspective, maybe do you want to describe for people what schizophrenia is, and how would you describe it?
Schizophrenia is people, they have hallucinations and delusions about things that are not real. See, my dad thought Mum was cooking up schnitzel once, and he thought a few of the crumbs in that were actually drugs, when it wasn't. It was probably just herbs or salt or something like that. And Dad was hearing all these voices that were telling him to do different things, and I don't know, it's just a whole lot of different behaviours that aren't real, but it seems real to them.
Well, the only reason I asked you that, Jenny, is because my mum had bipolar disorder 1, and if you look at bipolar disorder, it has like a definition, but everyone's a little bit different. Everyone has different habits.
Experiences for everyone are different, depending on. Everyone could be diagnosed with depression, but everyone's got their own different experience of depression, or they've got their own experience of anxiety. See, my sister's got depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia as well, but her story is completely different from Dad's, and it's different from mine. So
it's amazing, because you can't really put a definition on it, even though it's got this label. As you said, there's these different behaviors, and your sister is different in regards to what your dad behaviors maybe were. So it's pretty amazing. And so from what I know in regards to awareness now, bipolar and schizophrenia are 2 illnesses that I don't hear much spoken about. And schizophrenia, I think most people generally would say probably that's deemed as a higher, like probably really more serious than, let's say, other conditions. Why do you think that's not spoken about as much as other conditions?
I don't know, probably because I guess the bad media reporting considers schizophrenics to be really dangerous and stuff, or people in general with mental illness to be dangerous. So I remember this was a few years ago at the beginning of Schizophrenia Awareness Week. I was watching one of the national newses, and their first 3 stories were different crimes, but all the people had schizophrenia or similar mental illnesses. It's like one story after another. It's like, do you national newsers know it's Schizophrenia Awareness Week? And you're making out people with schizophrenia to be dangerous, where people aren't dangerous as long as they're medicated correctly. I mean, they're most likely hurt themselves than someone else.
That's a good point, because I think with schizophrenia, for whatever reason, it seems to be deemed, and you're right, as a violent or as an explosive sort of condition where someone can just explode and attack others. But when you just said then, which is spot on, is that they're more likely to hurt themselves than anyone else. So that's a real risk. Now, with your dad, like obviously there's a lot of things that come with schizophrenia, but when your dad was good, what can you just tell people what he was like when he was good? Because I know with my mum was not, I talk about bipolar disorder, it wasn't all bad, it was good as well. So maybe we'll talk about the good sides with the condition.
Well, what happened many years ago after he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, obviously he was diagnosed with cancer in 2004, and the doctors and psychiatrists actually put him on an antidepressant as well. And he was starting to take that. And Mum actually said to us, he was back to being the person she knew before he had schizophrenia. He was totally different. He was a lot more calmer. He was easy to get along with, which when he was really unwell with schizophrenia, I tried to get along with him at different times, but he would get quite verbally abusive with me and things like that. But that last 18 months when he had the cancer, he was just so easy to live with. I got on with him really well. It was probably about the best 18 months I'd had since I was little with him. So obviously being on the 2 medications obviously changed what was happening in his brain.
Well, what was the treatment for your dad normally? What was the sort of medication, or was it something where he had medication, then if he didn't adhere to it, there would be hospitalization? And what was the treatment, or how was the condition managed?
He was put onto one antipsychotic drug by the psychiatrist. He wasn't taking much, but when he knew it was going to help him, he did take it. But then I think he had a reaction, so they swapped him to another antipsychotic drug he was taking it, but he still wasn't really well, and that he was still walking around and still hearing voices and things like that. But I don't know, it sort of made him better when he was taking the antidepressant as well. It must have evened things out in his brain.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works. You just don't know. But I was going to say, with the was your dad ever hospitalised? Maybe do you want to talk about?
No, he wasn't hospitalised. He only went initially because the medical centre sent him, but he wouldn't stay there a year. The only hospitalisations he had was obviously when he had cancer and that.
Well, it's pretty impressive with schizophrenia to not have any. I know you said your dad wouldn't stay there, but it's pretty impressive because that's not probably the typical thing. Most people would have maybe a hospitalisation or two. So credit to him for not having to go there. Maybe let's talk more about your story. So maybe you want to talk about your journey with mental illness and maybe talk about some insights you've gathered from that.
Basically, I was diagnosed, like I said, with depression and anxiety many years ago. I went through stages of changes in appetite, energy, and difficulty sleeping. I had difficulty concentrating, and I guess headaches and stomach problems and all that sort of thing. I had real fears, and I was really worried about all sorts of things. It was just a combination of probably all the different signs and symptoms of both of them that got right on top of me. And I went to speak to my GP, started me on medication, and then things actually started getting a bit better for me. I started getting involved with the craft group and a few bits and pieces. And then my sister went through another bad stage. But then I thought, because I was well enough at the time, I thought, well, Dad's gone. Mum's not going to be around forever, as much I would like her to be around forever. But in reality, no one is. So I thought I better get a bit trained up and that to help my sister in case she has problems down the track, which occasionally she still does have a few problems here and there that I can step in and help her with now. And then I got more into the advocacy side of things, I've been doing volunteer work over the last few years at different organisations, and yeah.
Let's talk about when you say trained up. What do you mean by trained up?
I went to a few different courses. I did my mental health first aid certificate. I learnt more about the mental illnesses and all the coping strategies and how to help people that have a mental illness and things like that. Yep.
Let's talk about some of the strategies then for people who don't know. What are some strategies that you use or that you've employed to help other people cope with their condition?
I guess the main one is to talk to someone first up and ask for help if you need it, because there's always going to be someone around that can help you with whatever you're dealing with, like a counsellor or a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever step. But basically, I just eat relatively healthy now. I read and do a bit of craft, colouring in, things like that, and just, I guess, focus more on the positive than the negative side of my life.
Yeah, so you found that's really helped you is those things, as you said, nutrition, craft, like an activity. Do you do much with do you get together with other people often, like as a community sort of thing, or what do you do there?
I go out with my sister and friends for coffee and movies and shopping and whatever. Yeah.
And that's an important thing. So in mental health, we always talk about conditions and talking to psychiatrists, but it's those things which you just mentioned, like community relationships and nutrition. Doing something that stimulates the mind that you like doing.
Yeah,
those sort of things really do help.
And I keep in contact with friends by email and social media and things like that too. So
awesome. Now, with your advocacy, you're involved in a lot of programs and stuff. I think Finding North and all those different things.
Yeah.
Maybe do you want to tell people about those programs and what they do?
I'm involved in so much. So I'm a volunteer with Fraser Foundation, and they mentor young teenagers, like 13, 14-year-olds. We take them through a 20-week program over 2 school terms, and they learn skills like resilience and coping skills and things like that, how to deal with friendships, how to deal with all sorts of things. And another program is, I'm obviously involved with Lifeline, so I'm on the digital service. I pick up all the text messages that come through the website on their web chat program. So I do that side of things. I'm not on the phones as such, but I find a lot of young people are using the web chat and the text service to contact us.
That's cool. Yeah.
And even now, when I talk to some of these young kids, they still don't know where to go for help, because I was on the chat one time with a young person, and they were about 12 or 13. They didn't know about Kids Helpline. So by telling them that I know about Kids Helpline that can help you, they actually obviously contacted Kids Helpline after Lifeline and hopefully got the help that they needed.
And how long have you been doing that for?
Lifeline, I've probably only been about 6 months with Lifeline, but with Fraser Foundation mentoring, this will be my 6th year when we start back in term 2.
And what sort of kids are doing that program? Like, is it something like, is it selected kids, or is it just a blanket group of kids, or who's going into that program you help?
Well, they have a program counsellor allocated to each of the schools from Rose Foundation. They go into the schools and talk to the wellbeing team about what young people would benefit from the program that are in year 8 or year 9. And then they're selected to go to an information session, and they find out a bit more about the program. And then obviously they have to get their parents' consent or guardians' consent before they start the program with us.
And what changes do you see in the program from, let's say, when they come in at the start to the end? What sort of results or differences are you seeing in the people?
I guess a lot of young kids come in without a lot of confidence, and they don't know any coping strategies, and they don't know where to go for help and things like that. But by the time they finish the 20 weeks, they're feeling more confident and they know where to go for the help. They know how to deal with some of the problems of life.
And what's a coping strategy? Like, it's an interesting thing, even though I don't really know what a coping strategy is. So maybe just educate me about maybe a couple of coping strategies or some resilience tools that you train with the kids.
We just talk to them about how to bounce back from different adversities that they might have. We speak to them about how they might deal with different situations. If they come up out of a situation that there might be drugs or alcohol involved, how would they go about dealing with that? Yeah.
I was going to say, with your advocacy and you're involved in a lot of things, what do you think governments need to do more of? Because you said at the start, there is still a stigma with different things, which there definitely is. So what do you think can be done more? Because there's obviously a lot of money filtering into the space now, because there's a bit of governments are all, it's been, it's a political good thing to do. So they're putting a lot of money into it. But where do you think the money needs to go? What do you think that needs to be done to improve things?
I think most of the government programs have only really got short-term funding, like for a couple of years or something. They've got really strict criteria. And that means people are on waiting lists to get into some of these programs. And see, after a couple of years, the funding will cut out and the people using the services or something will have to go and find something else, because governments change obviously every 3 or 4 years, and each time a different government's in, they've got different ideas about where the funding should go. And
what do you think is the most effective use of funding? If you could put it to, if you had to allocate a bunch of funds to somewhere, where do you think is the most effective use from your experience?
If I had funding myself, I'd probably put it into early intervention programs like Rose Foundation have. I'd put it into training education for school teachers and other frontline workers, like for everyone to have a mental health first aid certificate so they know how to handle different situations. I put money into more peer workers, community settings and hospitals and things like that.
I'm familiar with peer workers. My mum used to have peer workers and stuff. So maybe just tell people who are not familiar with them, what is a peer worker and what do they do?
Peer worker is a person with a lived experience. They're either had their own lived experience or they've got experience as a carer, and they just help people navigate the system and navigate any of the problems that might come up for them. Yeah, it depends on what the person actually wants.
Yeah, and those people are important because there's a level of respect instantly there if they know that that person's got a similar background or similar experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to a psychologist or a psychiatrist who might know.
Theirs is more of a medical background where peer workers have their own experience. So
now you mentioned early intervention program. Maybe do you want to talk about that? I know you mentioned the Race Foundation, but it's an interesting thing because I haven't heard much about these programs myself. So what's the goal exactly of the early intervention program? Is it getting high? Is it getting the high risk people that the counsellor thinks who might have some issues, and then trying to give them tools to at an earlier stage to help them through?
Give them help at the earliest stage before things get to a stage where they need more serious help.
Now, regards to stigma, what do you think can be done more to reduce stigma? What would you do?
Speaking about it more openly, treating people with mental illness with the same respect as you would anyone else. Show a bit of compassion towards us, because at the end of the day, we're still a human being. Yeah, more education, more community awareness, but there is a lot now than what there was 30, 40 years ago.
When you say respect, has there been situations where you felt as though you haven't been respected due to someone, any discrimination or anything like that? Or
yeah, because they haven't understood anything about mental illness.
Yeah. Can you talk about that situation then? Because I'm interested to hear about how that's affected you.
I had one experience that I was seeing a medical specialist about something quite a few years ago. He was more interested in the medical problem I was there for, and I was getting annoyed with the way he was speaking to me and all that. And I just pretty much broke down in tears. And he said, "Are you still taking your medication?" I said, "Yeah." It's like he was more interested in medication than my feelings.
How's your overall experience been with medical professionals or with psychiatrists or psychologists? How have you found them overall?
That wasn't even a psychologist or psychiatrist. It was another medical specialist.
Right. Okay. How's your overall experience been though in general with psychologists and psychiatrists? How have you found it?
I haven't had much to do with psychiatrists. I've had more to do with psychologists and counsellors and found them quite good. And my own GP's been really good as well.
That's sort of a good thing. You got to have that duo, don't you? The good GP and a good, if you've got your psychologist or your counsellor, they're the two duo which can work together. But I was going to say, any tips for people to find a good psychologist? Because it's not easy. It's not just sometimes for people, it's not, they think it's the first psychologist that's right for them. Most often it's not. So how long did it take you to find your right psychologist or counsellor?
Probably not too long, but I know with my sister, she's had a few over the time and a couple which she really didn't get on well with, but she's had a couple that she's really worked well with, and it's made a real big difference. She's under one at the moment that she works really well with.
What's the sort of feedback you're getting from her? What's the difference between the good one and the bad one per se, or the one that she didn't get on with too well?
I guess they weren't listening as much as what some of them do.
Yeah.
Was a big thing.
And how's the difference in her like behavior? Like, how have you noticed? Like, what's the difference you've noticed from with her having a good psychologist?
Meg, she's a lot happier. She'll even tell me she listens. She takes notice of what I'm saying.
That's good to hear. Now, with yourself, what are three actionable tips that someone who is struggling can implement that you think is something that anyone can do, but that can definitely help with their mental health?
Ask for help will be the main one. Go and talk to someone, GP, friend, family, school teacher if you're at school, someone that you can trust. Obviously, self-care. Make sure you look after yourself, go for a walk or do something, eat healthy, listen to music, do something you enjoy. I think keep focusing on the positive. You will get through it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, is there anything you want to leave us with today, Jenny? Any final thoughts or anything, or where can people learn more about you? Do you have any? Do you have a website or anything, or do you have any stories available online for people to read? Or
don't have a website, but there are a few stories online. I'll give you the links to that you can share on the website.
Yeah, Jenny Smith. We can type it into Google. I'm sure they'll come up. And
yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jenny. I know this has been a while in the making, so thank you very much for your time and for sharing your story. So I really appreciate it. And good luck with everything and stay in touch.
Thanks.